Welcome to Reputation Revolution. This is the podcast where we help individuals like you to establish your voice in the marketplace, enhance the credibility of that voice, extend the reach of your story and your message, and finally, extract value from your efforts in building a meaningful personal brand that's both recognized and respected. Now, on with the show.
Welcome back to the Reputation Revolution podcast. My name is Trevor Young and got a terrific show lined up for you today. You know, we cover on this podcast, if you're a regular listener, you know that we cover all things social media, all things creating content and podcasting and blogging and being on YouTube and doing our own videos, becoming our own media channel. But we also talk about things like, you know, we have case studies of people who are out there doing fantastic work in growing their profile and their reputation in a way that's strategic and sustainable. But one thing we don't talk about, and maybe it's inherent in everything we probably discuss it, but it's about relationships with the people who matter the most to the success of your business or your career or cause or issue if that's important to you. And well, I'm not just talking about transactional relationships, but strategic relationships, and doing it in a way that's really purposeful, genuine, and a word that will pop up a lot in today's interview is intentional. So to chat further about this topic with me, I have an expert in the whole arena of building strategic relationships for leadership success. In fact, she's got a course on maven.com of that same name, Strategic Relationships for Leadership Success. Her name is Nina Thomas. Now, she's the founder of Harmonic Advisory, and she has 25 years experience advising literally thousands of executives at the highest levels of some of Australia's and the world's leading companies, including PwC, GE, ANZ Bank, Deloitte, and the Victorian Government. And it's just a really interesting, fun conversation, pretty open-ended. Yes, we talk about the strategic side of relationship building. We look at building a strategic relationship map, and then we get into the tactics and the best practice and some ways to do it, and also, you know, the importance of building a visibility plan. So it's kind of all encompassing, but I like the fact that, you know, we're doing it around a topic which we all think we do and we know, and yes, I network, or, you know, every day of the week, but really are we doing it strategically and in a way that's really genuine and intentional? And I think with, you know, maybe some of us were doing that prior to COVID, and a lot of that has dropped off. And I think after listening to Nina speak with passion about the topic, you'll very much be in the camp of, yeah, this is maybe something I need to revisit and do more work on. So I hope you enjoy this interview with Nina Thomas. Nina Thomas, welcome to the Reputation Revolution show, and I'm looking forward to digging into all things strategic relationships.
Thank you, Trevor. Just delightful to be here.
Nina, when we talk about strategic relationships, and here on the podcast, I mean, we talk about all aspects of communicating and building your brand and you know, capitalizing on the profile and reputation you build, and I guess to a degree, relationships is always there, but I've never really just pulled it out as its separate topic. So it'd be really good to get into this today. But before we get going, can you give people a bit of a thumbnail sketch of who you are, what you do, your business, and the sorts of people you're helping?
Sure. So I run a organisation called Harmonic Advisory, and it's a communications advisory business that specialises in helping people build strategic relationships. So for individuals and corporate kind of entities, teams. So they work kind of in lockstep but slightly differently. So it's about taking people from transactional relationships or really non-progressive relationships into a space where they're actually making a difference. And that's kind of the highlight of what happens is you take somebody who's, you know, might be in a leadership role, and you give them access to people and a pathway and a strategy and all the tools they need to actually orchestrate and own those relationships and build their own influence.
Right, so we're all about influence here, and influence and impact and that side of things. When you talk to people about, how do you break down, do people come and ask you, what is a strategic relationship? How do you couch that for them? Because, I mean, we've all got relationships, and whether or not they're strategic or not is another matter. But is it simply as a case of, who are the people that matter the most to the success of your business or your cause or your issue, and then mapping them out, and we'll probably go into obviously a bit deeper in that, but just at a top level, building those relationships, but it's key is to identifying them.
Yeah, so it comes back to your goals, right? So you might have a set of KPIs or personal goals, so hence the teams, hence the individual piece, and then basically it comes down to, well, who do you know and who do you need to know? So shifting the needle on those transactional relationships, reaching out to the people you don't know, but primarily figuring out who you need to know, and then working on a system that kind of helps you build engagement with those people. And sometimes it's just one cup of coffee. It doesn't have to be a big thing.
Yeah, I agree.
But ultimately, most people know that they're feeling isolated, they're overwhelmed, they might be under siege at the office, and they don't know where to go. So they're going, well, I know I've been told, I've been promoted, I've been told I need the relationships to get me to the next level. And they're like, well, I don't know how to do that. So, I know people, but I don't know how to go and, talk to the CEO of a certain organisation or the head of another business. I don't know where to be visible. So that's the kind of matrix of it, is how do you help them figure out what that strategy is, help them figure out who's who, and then I do something called a visibility plan, so that then gets them into the market.
All righty, well, let's unpack this then. So you've got sort of 4 cornerstones, I guess, to what it is that you do with people. So it's about defining your strategy, creating a strategic relationship map, developing your visibility plan, as you just said, and then getting started and getting out there. So how about we go through these cornerstones and just meander through them, and we'll have a bit of a conversation around each of the 4. So defining your strategy. So how do you approach that then? And I mean, with relationships, I mean, this to me sounds very pure public relations. We're both from the same background or similar background in a PR and communication sense, but where a lot of people think PR is getting your name in the press or on TV still. As I mentioned earlier, who are the people that matter the most to the success of your business or cause or issue, and then it's about deepening the level of connection with them. So it kind of fits under that nicely. And as you said, having a cup of coffee with someone might be good, but that's getting tactical. Let's start with the strategy. I guess it's being able to identify the right people.
Well, yeah, but if we step back a second, you kind of go, right, well, let's say you got a business that has a big project that's been stagnant for a period of time, and some of these projects that we work on are multi-billion-dollar projects, and it's apparent that the reason that they've stagnated is they're not talking to the right people about the right things. So because otherwise they'd be connecting. So there's a gap there. The other area is that they know they need to kind of build some longevity in their career. Or some people even come to me and saying, I want to change my job. I want to go somewhere else. I go, okay. And ironically, the people who come and want to change their jobs end up staying for longer because they find this kind of pool of value and excitement and interest within once they start to build their relationships internally. So once we kind of go, right, well, what's your big goal? Where do you want to be in, let's say, 3 years? And we often do a timeline kind of map. Then we can kind of figure out what that might look like. And for a team or a corporate type environment, it might only be 12 months. But if they need to, let's say, get approval on a project or generate more deals for a business, then they have a different strategy to someone who's going to be trying to, grow their career, for example. So once we get clear on where the goals are, we can then kind of map out what the strategy looks like. So, you would break that down into, what are your kind of key areas of focus? So what are you going to look at first? And invariably, we start to do a bit of an audit on where they've got relationships. And quite often you find that people either have strong internal relationships or strong external relationships. They won't usually have both. So it's about kind of then going, okay, so then now we can see where there's a gap. And that then leads into the kind of next piece. But you flesh it out based on, right, well, what and I don't like people to kind of go and have a list, It's like, what are the 6 things you're going to look at over the next 12 months? And we're going to do 3 in 6 months and then another 3 after that. And it can, it's dynamic, so it can interchange a bit. But it gives them it's not too big a challenge and it's not too terrifying, because COVID has brought about a whole bunch of crises of confidence with people, and they feel like they've lost social skills. So it's about going, righto, well, what's the first next step? And let's make it really simple for you. And that might be just something as simple as attending like a seminar or something like that, where they're in the room and that they're around people. Or it's attending an internal event if they don't connect with people. And that might be terrifying for some people. But once they kind of get over that, then they start to, get to the next stage.
So what I hear you saying is it's really around intentionality.
Yeah, and confidence. Backing yourself a bit, going, actually, I really want to have a crack at this, and I recognise there's a problem, and I've got somebody behind me saying, yes, give it a go. That usually helps. So, for a lot of people, they have a corporate budget that they like for professional development that they can use, but they often don't, because they're going, it's not a technical training piece, whereas it's actually essential to progress in business. So that's kind of where there's often a disconnect of well, I think I need to do this, but I don't know how, or I'm a technical subject matter expert and I haven't recognised that some of these soft skills are necessary.
I suppose if we go back in time a little bit and, we probably called this networking and probably still do call it networking. But remember, I guess networking had a lot of its genesis, I guess, with, salespeople out in the road and going out and meeting and greeting and handing their business cards out and all of that side of things, which I'm sure there are a few people do. And I've met a few in the world who are really good networkers, and the ones that do it in a really great and intentional way are all about helping others get what they want, and that's often a great networking skill. Is it sort of going down that path still, or is that's really old school now? We don't, we can be a lot more street smart, a lot more savvy about it.
Yeah. So a couple of things. I feel the networking is kind of your shotgun approach, whereas this is very, very targeted.
Right.
And
good distinction.
And I think the other thing, just coming back to your point, it's intentional and it's low risk. So if you think about all of the sort of thought leaders and spokespeople who get out there in the media, this is absolutely not about that. This is about giving people a forum through which they can grow their career or their business without the risk of media. So it's quite a safe place to go and, build that personal brand or build that depth of insight that you might have become disconnected from over the last few years, or you may never have had, for example. So it's kind of in that space where you can kind of go, right, well, I'm going to be intentional and I'm going to find a pathway through, and I'm really going to start to talk to this person, this person, and this person. And I say to people, it's sustainably, you can really only have 2 meetings a month if you want to keep it going. Like some people, you have bigger months than others, but if you think about it, if you're trying to get in the diary of the CEO so you can have a chat about an idea you had, well, you're going to have to wait 2 or 3 weeks to get in the diary. So, and same with just about anybody to set up a cup of coffee. So if you sort of plan for that, and then you've still got to do your day job, that's kind of how it fits together.
And so what about, I guess, there's the end person you need to get to, but do you take into account influencers? And when I say influence, I'm not talking TikTok influencers or Instagram influencers, but other people who are influential generally in your space.
Yes, and that's that's like the strategy of saying if you go to an event, you're going to speak to the keynote, which is somewhere you can kind of get some insight. So what is kind of the best approach is to be asking for advice and asking for insights. So people like to help other people. And so quite often your opportunity to help other people is by allowing them to help you and giving yourself a chance to learn from them, because that's usually where this comes about, is you're actually seeking knowledge. And people get to a certain level, let's say the influencers in the the industry that you're in, they actually quite like to impart knowledge. And so there's a kind of a two-way street. It feels good to have somebody asking you about something, and it feels good to learn from some of those people. So that's quite a nice way of going about it. But at the same time, you kind of have to build up to that too. You can't just, straight off the bat go in and have a chat to David Thodey, for example. Like, that could be absolutely terrifying. But you might go and, sit at a table at an event and just be happy that you've met one or two people in that kind of room. And
David's a big high-end businessman in Australia, so it's getting to some of those people that can be quite challenging. Yeah. So that's all around that, defining that strategy. But I like the idea that you said audit, and I guess going, who do you know, and who do you need to know? I guess is where are the gaps in your relationship mapping? Well, you go then into creating a strategic relationship map. So is that sort of is that where you actually map and prioritize those people who you want to see?
Yeah, definitely.
And develop a relationship with? Is that what that part of it, and what does that kind of involve and look like?
Yeah. So that's absolutely where we start to put names on a page. So it's broken down. And you'd appreciate this: above the line, below the line. So internal relationships, external relationships versus advertising. So, and so, but usually this is where the gap comes in, is the internal bucket, and it's all broken into sections. And I'm pretty kind of simple kind of approach is it's all on one page. Is I say to people, we don't need reams of paper. You've got to be able to manage this. So it's just keep it as simple as possible. And and I've got clients who travel the world, and they've got a piece of paper in their jacket pocket, and they pull it out and they cross it out, and they tick this and all that sort of stuff. So so it's ultimately about, we break it down, we go internal. We look at the kind of transactional business, everyday relationships. We look at the industry bodies, stakeholder groups. We look at let's say government, board, for career sort of support. It would be executive search or recruitment. There's social media, because that's a really powerful platform for people to be, even just having a first meeting. Media, because people seem to have stopped reading the newspapers, and I'm saying to people is pick up a newspaper, just go and, even pick up one, a week, or a different one a week, or something like that, so you get a sense of the curation of information, and you're not dependent on what the news on a social media channel feeds you. So you get the physical kind of ability. But what that reading a newspaper does is it gives you something else to talk about rather than your day-to-day job. And that's really important when it comes to building relationships, is you can't just talk about something really transactional, because then you don't actually shift the needle. So once you kind of break down where your relationships are, the other thing that we try and do is we have this kind of little feeder box, which is for people who I call your raving fans. So who are the people that are talking about you? Who are people who are advocating for you? And most people have absolutely no idea who they are. But
your allies.
Yeah, totally. But over a 12-month period, that box gets quite full. And then you get like I said, you often get a gap in the internal relationship space. So I say to people, that's your home base. So you really need to, if you're quite comfortable in the other spaces, you probably need to do some work there and go on the charm offensive and get to talk to people internally and listen to them.
Yeah. And if you're running your own business, it's kind of those people within your, I guess, community, that business community, and, continuing to build allies. You definitely want that bucket full. It's a bit of a worry if it's not. And I guess the other part of that is, what about lapsed relationships, or the relationship might still be there, but you haven't sort of I used to call this reheating cold soup. Reheating cold soup is going back to the well, and who do I know, who haven't I caught up with in a while, which I think is always a good thing. And I've chatted to some people earlier in the year, and what's one thing that's been working for them. We did it actually for the first episode of this particular season 7 of the podcast, and what's one thing that's working for you. And a number of them said, I'm just jumping on calls and talking to people.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm literally setting up Zoom calls, or I'm catching up with people that I haven't caught up with for a very, very long time.
Yep. And your phone is your best friend.
Yep.
And look, also, I think COVID has served us a bit of an ace card there because, 3 years actually has gone really, really fast. It didn't at the time, but in terms of relationships, they haven't really gone to cold soup, like they're still kind of tepid, and look, at the end of the day, it's about figuring out what you're going to say. Like, I rang up someone last week that I haven't spoken to for 12 years, and and I just rang up to check in and say hello. He's going through a tough time, so I was just saying, hey, how are you? Just wanted to see how you're doing, and it was like I never put the phone down. Like it was, and that happens. People are surprised and delighted, and yet that's the recipient. Yet the person making the phone call you could write a book on excuses not to pick up the phone. Yet it's the most powerful tool.
Yeah, indeed. So then, you call this where the rubber hits the road, building these relationships, and I agree with you there. It's the actual getting out and doing it. You've alluded to a number of the tools, i.e. getting on the phone and stuff like that. But if we've got our sort of prioritized list and we've done our audit and we sort of mapped, I guess, our where we want to strengthen some relationships and warm up some cold soup potentially. It's going to be a recurring thing. What's the? I like how you were talking about. What's in the media and that, because it's what you're going to say to them is just as important as the method of getting to them. So let's look at those two parts. One is the method of reaching out, and we've got lots at our disposal, but you might have some pet tactics there. And then I'd like you to this is a double header. I'd like you to go in a little bit more about the conversation starters, and you don't just talk about yourself and what you've been up to, but what's the other person doing, what's happening, what's keeping them up at night, what are the challenges they're seeing, all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I'll start with probably the easiest thing people can do to reach out is our old friend LinkedIn. Is a connection request if you're not already connected, but it has to be personalised. So it's a, hi Trevor, haven't seen you for a while, but was just thinking about you and thought it'd be good to connect. It's as simple as that. And you could do 10 of them with the same message, but it's got to be personalised. And that's a really easy way. And once you kind of rip the Band-Aid off, and that's really only the first time that you might feel discomfort with that, maybe or the first 5 times, once you get past that and you think, because we all have this fear of rejection, right? You think that people are waiting to reject you. Well, they're not. Actually, most people are pretty happy that you're reaching out and that you acknowledge you've been thinking of them. So, it's quite a nice way of connecting with people. The phone, I find, is quite a challenging tool for people. They seem to be better at hiding behind an email. So there's a couple of ways around that. One is send an email, and just think if you thought I'd check in. You can send a text too. Hey, how you going? Think of you. Thought I'd check in. We'll give you a call later in the week. And then you kind of get the kind of two-way interaction happening. So, I would say if you've got a confidence issue, start with LinkedIn or email, and then ideally you pick up the phone and you move from there. You're right, what do you say? There's only so much of, renovation, school, holidays, work that you can talk about. You've got to kind of get into the trenches. And that's where you actually build that, mutual appreciation of things. And you want to actually show that you kind of got a worldly view as well, that you're thinking a bit more broadly than just what's in your lane. And so I personally find the newspaper is the best tool for that. Like I can kind of keep a finger on the pulse. And I get, once you subscribe to a newspaper, and I'm a dinosaur, I get it home delivered. But I open it and then it's there, right? And it's easy. And then I keep across all of that. And it means that when stuff shifts, I can say, hey, well, what do you think about, the emergence of AI and what it's going to do for brand and reputation risk once everybody knows how to use it and you've got a bunch of deep fakes posing as you. So that could trigger a whole bunch of things, right?
Absolutely.
And so then you can kind of tailor your question based on an issue you're following, and then you can kind of make it relevant to the person you're talking to, and then they could lean into that and they can give you some insights.
And it's like going, going to whether it's just a coffee meetup where there is, or a meetup, for example, where there's lots of different people there, and when you've met someone and you're just blown away by how you both just get deep into a conversation, and so much so you probably don't talk to anyone else at the event, and that that's where you build that deepen that level of connection, and we'll walk away sometimes and think, well, I feel like I know that person really well, and you've only just met them.
Yeah, and you got to follow up. So once you've done that, let's say you're at a conference and you have that conversation, and I will walk away from an event where I've had maybe 2 of those conversations, and I think that's a successful outing. I've had a fabulous time talking to those people. I'm not interested in the 20 people or the 100 people. Not worried about that.
It's not a numbers game.
No, absolutely not. And so then I will reach out to them and say, hi, Peter, great to have a chat with you just now. Or really enjoyed meeting you at this event, but it'll be a LinkedIn follow-up. Thought it'd be good to connect here as well. So I'll close the loop. And then you might say to them, let's say in a month, you reach out and you have a cup of coffee. You say, hey, how you going? Be nice to have a chat. Or you invite them to things. That's another way of, because you subscribe to certain conferences and events and stuff, and presumably you've got a mutual interest in something. So something crops up and you invite them along to that. That's a really nice thing. Hey, I'm going to this event. Do you want to come? You know, and so that then you kind of, because relationships need some momentum to keep going, and there's got to be some sort of currency.
And this is where I think I've found that social works in a number of ways. It's Twitter in the earlier days particularly used to be fantastic, because you'd talk to someone on Twitter and then you'd say, hey, let's have a coffee, and you'd go and have a coffee with them, and it's as if you're at meeting number 5. You know each other really well. So that's kind of in reverse the other way. But I've always subscribed to, you go and have a meeting, or you've been, as you said, you've been a meetup or a meeting or a conference or a seminar or event or something, and you meet someone there, and on the way back in the cab, in the taxi, you punch out the LinkedIn. It's a race who gets it first, or you do it then and there. You just touch phones now, and there's LinkedIn through the app can automatically do it, and I think that's a good habit actually. Because you do it face to face straight away, that way no one forgets, or you do it on the way back to your office or something like that. So, because if you do leave it later, it's something that you might not get to. Life gets in the road. So, and that's where you're right. LinkedIn's just the best for that, and that's that initial thing, that initial one. But the kicker then is the follow up, isn't it? That's whether the follow up is a DM through LinkedIn or email or whatever, because the only problem with the DM in LinkedIn is they might not get it.
Yeah.
They might not check it enough.
Yeah. Although it's interesting, because they might not get an email now. So you've kind of, I find that you're more likely to reach people on a LinkedIn message than an email if you haven't connected before. You can get chucked in the spam folder and then you're in trouble. So.
That is true. And if you follow people up with an email from their LinkedIn contact details, there's every chance that their email is a personal one.
Which they've checked.
Because for some reason, people put their personal one in because they change jobs, but they don't change their personal email. So that follow-up is important. And I think the simple cup of coffee is good. What about for people, though, then when you're not in the same geographic location?
Well, a Zoom is a good way of doing things. I've had a few Zooms with people. I find them a little harder, but a phone call is effective too, and a Zoom. But I would probably, when you're trying to schedule it, I would schedule it over the phone. Just, I know it's so much quicker, I just pick up the phone. And then you're actually having a conversation with them before you get to a Zoom. So you've kind of broken the ice a little bit, and then you're in with a chance. So, but I have done quite a few initial kind of meetings with people via Zoom. And I've got clients that I work with who I've never physically met. So, and I enjoy working with them, and we have a great rapport, and, a lot of clients become friends in that regard. So, so it certainly works. It's just about, you got to kind of, play your cards right. Don't have hour-long Zooms. That's the other problem is people kind of, Zoom has this default setting of an hour, I think you need to wind it back to 45 minutes or even 30 minutes and just, don't take too much time. And then again, the follow-up, right? So you've got to, presumably by the time you're having a Zoom, you've already connected. And then the other thing is, send them an article that, you spoke about. And that's another nice way to kind of, close the loop. So, productivity is a big issue at the moment. I don't know if you get McKinsey newsletters, but McKinsey's thrown out a newsletter on productivity today. And I'm like, God, I've got some people I could send that to. So, and that's quite a nice opportunity to say, hey, I know this is a really hot topic at the moment. Thought you might like to read this, that sort of thing. So, and give them a sense of being valued. That's really nice when people are appreciated, valued, thank them for their time, all that sort of stuff, and then they lean into it.
I wouldn't downplay or underestimate the power of if you're getting together with the right people and there's kind of intellectual stimulation and that side of things, and you understand their interests and you send them something that that they're interested in, thought this might be of interest is a simple one, or love to hear your views on this, or they're very powerful. Ways of going about that, because you're sharing common ground, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you just got to be careful how long it is. Like some of those McKinsey reports are 160 pages. So.
That's in that world. My world's probably more likely to be a YouTube video or a pod. It's usually a podcast, actually. I'll be going for a walk and someone's on and I'm listening to them and I've never heard them before and I find them really interesting, and something will often spark, I know such and such should be interested in that, and I can do it from my phone, and I can text them straight away with the link. Yeah. I can go straight into it. So I've found that way, and even at the exact spot, that I found that incredibly powerful, and then we can talk about that person, and sometimes they say, look, that thing you sent me, I've checked them out, and I've actually gone and checked more of their interviews out, and I've now subscribed to their podcast. So those little things, you're helping people become better at what they do, smarter, more informed. Can't go wrong. No. My mantra is no one ever went wrong being useful and helpful.
No, that's right. Yeah, and you mean well, and it's apparent when you do that.
Look, it's got to be genuine the whole way, I think, and that's where if we go back to that old networking side of things, we've all met people who are genuinely great at just with people and networking and helping others and introducing people to each other. I think that's probably the next kicker that's really works powerfully. Like minds, I'd be interested in your take on that. But then there's the snake oil salesman who's just collecting names for the old school Rolodex because it's an ego thing. Yeah. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the generous and the genuine side of things. But what do you think about the introducing people to one another in your network?
Well, that can be tricky. It can work really well, but often it depends on how often you do it. So I'm a bit cautious about doing that. I would certainly introduce people. I tend to, where I can, try and introduce them face to face. I find that there's a better outcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So because there was a while back there, pre-COVID, and you'd get into all these sort of angel investor, VC kind of rooms, and everybody would be just you'd have a speaker and everybody would offer their network to them. But if there's no context and there's no. Pathway to that relationship, it can be a bit kind of fraught. So, and it invariably will be transactional. So it's how do you kind of get it into that mutually beneficial space, and that's probably where it can be tricky. But there are times when you say to somebody, for example, I've got a client at the moment who is having a challenge where they've got someone on their team who's a subject matter expert, very, very good at what they do, highly technical, no matter what they do, lousy personal skills. I said, all right, so you need to go and talk to somebody, and I could have referred them in, but they actually had their own contacts. But I was sort of referring them into the professional services space where you have this problem where you have then they become a technical director versus a partner. And I said, you need to go and speak to someone who can tell you how they've solved that problem. And then of course you have this conversation. And but if they didn't know anyone, I could have easily referred them and would have been happy to.
Yeah.
But you're solving a problem versus you two
Yeah.
should chat. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of a bit weird. And then once you've solved a problem, then it's on you as the person who's received the referral to the individual that someone's put you in touch with to then continue to follow that up and to make the effort. It's a bit like a mentoring relationship, where the onus is on the mentee to work on that relationship, not the mentor. There's not as much in it for the mentor as is the mentee. So the mentee has to do the work, not to make it a job for the mentor.
Yep. That makes perfect sense. And as you said, we're talking here strategic relationships and going deeper and making less and more quality versus the transactional side of things. So you also talk about then developing a visibility plan, and you alluded to it earlier. Let's unpack that. What does that kind of look like? Is it at one scale? It could be, speaking and media, being in the media and that, and at the other scale, it could be just, doing comments on LinkedIn or whatever. But what's your view on the whole visibility side of things?
So yeah, that's an interesting one, because you get the introverts and the extroverts and the atroverts and the everything in the middle, and and so every introvert that I say just comment or like something on LinkedIn goes, oh, no, so and I've had a stack of clients that are introverted that I've worked with, and I remember one in particular, and I had to wait. He was not going to come. We booked a lunch and he wasn't going to go, and I was waiting in his foyer, and I said, you better come down, I'm downstairs, or I'm coming up and I'm dragging you there. And you don't always get that, but it's quite handy to have a buddy to go with. But to attend something together, as in take a friend, doesn't have to be anything strategic. It's about you getting out there and finding the least path of resistance. So yes, you can like stuff. Liking's great, easy done. Commenting is probably, people feel it's a bit uncomfortable, but it's you can say, hey, as a first comment, easy one, great article, thanks for sharing. No one's going to complain about that. You're not offering insight or triggering a conversation, but you're acknowledging, saying thank you, and then you kind of putting the little flag above the parapet before you put your head up. So so that's one way. But what I try and encourage people to do is to get out and to actually get in front of people, because even when you're not meeting with someone on your map, for example, who's like a high priority relationship for you, just the act of being in the room will give you a sense of reading people, gives you some insights. You've got that because you're sharing the knowledge. You can't just sit in a corner and but you've got to pick the event, right? So I used to always say that the Institute of Company Directors, those sorts of events where you have individuals attending versus some of the big industry bodies where people buy a table. So where you've got individuals turning up, you could barely get a drink in your hand before someone's talking to you. And to me, that's a great environment to walk into, because you're welcomed immediately. And, B&I, all of those sort of networking things where there are people there to meet other people. So, those, but also there to learn. And sometimes you just walk in and you sit down and you learn something and you leave. That's okay, because it's given you two things. One is you've got out and you've done it. And the other is that you've got something to talk about. I went to this event the other day and I heard this, or it was, gosh, I actually really disagreed with that. And it's okay to disagree too, is that sometimes we don't have to buy into everything we listen to. So those are quite good ways. So coming back to what does the visibility plan look like? So the goal is sustainable and not terrifying, but initially I recognize some things are terrifying, and I have clients who've been working with me for some months who are still like, oh my God, I can't do this. And I'm like, yes, you can. We're going to do it right now. We're going to draft that message right now. And they do, and then I say, but you have to let me know how you go. And I get these text messages, I got it, which is kind of cool. So so those sorts of things are, is 1 to 2 meetings a month with the kind of strategic relationship. And I encourage people to have coffees and go to them. So don't try and make someone come to you. You got to kind of swallow the hubris and get out there and go to them. So it's easy. It's like downstairs in their building, and that gets you in front of them, and it's easy. Plus you get the space from your office environment. And then we'll do stuff like, we'll sort out your LinkedIn profile before you do too much, because you really got to have a story that you can hang your hat on before you go to market. And we can all use ChatGPT to write us a LinkedIn profile now, which is kind of cool. It may not be perfect. And I've got a little tool on my Profile Builder website that can help them with an elevator pitch if they don't even know what to say. So there's some tools there that people can use. And then, once you've got your story right, and it's not war and peace, it's a succinct story, then it's easier, because we all look at each other before we have a meeting. Gosh, do I need to know a little bit about what are the common interests? I can see you followed Harvard. Did you see this, or did you go there, or have you had it? Whatever that looks like, you're giving them something as well. So you're making it easy for them if they're going to do some online research before they meet with you, which could be 5 minutes before on your LinkedIn profile, which invariably it is. Give them something.
And make it accurate. Yes. Make it simple and accurate.
And then, attend conferences. If it's on your list, your KPIs to build your visibility, put your hand up to speak. That's not hard to do. If you feel that you really want to do this, some people, I like to do this, is go and speak to the speakers, the keynotes at the end. Don't fan girl boy them. Just say, hey, that was really interesting. Could I ask you a question about this? Like you have a question. Yep. So, you're actually adding some value and you're having a conversation. What else do we do? They're the primary ones.
Yep. And so, I agree with LinkedIn. You've got to get that right, and any other social channel, depending on what you're in, to get that right as well. But isn't that also then there's a little bit of a, to take things up a notch, then there's more of a content plan, I suppose, behind it, for those who want to start, there's the basics about what we've been talking about, but the next layer in is doing the content and having an opinion and being out there, and, I guess they're all talking points then eventually. And, you've got to be both interesting. I've always found you've got to be both interesting and interested in others for it to work.
Yep.
And, if you're not, if it's hard for someone to see that you're actually going to be interesting to talk to, it might not, if you don't really know them and they're just reaching out, then that maybe is a bit of an issue.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's where the newspaper can be your best friend, because you've got to kind of build that base of knowledge and insight. And sometimes what you do alone might be interesting enough, but you've got to be able to ask questions and have a base that gives you a level of information. Social's very, very powerful for that, and that being present. And, there's a bit of a misconception about how active you have to be. Like some people are like, are you on LinkedIn for hours at a time? I'm like, no. But having the point of view I think it takes time to build up to that. Or, but sometimes you need someone just to kind of draw it out, where you can kind of, brainstorm into a safe space of going, well, I've got a view on this. Or, if you go back to the strategy, well, what am I kind of focused on here, is then you might lean into that. And then you're giving something else back. But you're giving all the time, you're giving a bit. And so that's the content plan plays into that. Well, what am I giving? What do I know? What's interesting? What's valuable? But also, what did I hear that I thought I could share? And one of the easy ways around that is to just share an article on LinkedIn. Thought this was interesting for 3 reasons. Sharing, just in case anyone else has an interest in this. And it can keep it really, really simple. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be your views on anything political, and build up to it, because it's a gradual process, and you just have to kind of sustainably, consistently keep at it. And just that visibility does build over time.
It does. Strategic visibility. and the sharing of content and other people's content, again, is it an article? Is it a report? Is it, pumping someone else's tires because you like what it is they do, and just shining the spotlight on others is very powerful. And I think the way, if on LinkedIn, you're not going to get as much reach if you just do content sharing. We know that the algorithm's against you. But that's not a reason not to do it, So don't expect you're going to get thousands of views necessarily because, LinkedIn doesn't like you being sent off from the walled garden of LinkedIn. But it doesn't. That's not a reason not to do it, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it's a good first step. So, in most of this, you're thinking about first steps. What's the first step that I can take that's going to get me from, point A to point B? And then that kind of, once you start going, right, well, that didn't kill me. I'm still here. Hallelujah. Let's go to the next step. So what does that look like? Yeah. And that's where the confidence comes from. And then you start to take a bit of a chance on things, and you might, want to have a go at, writing your own piece or getting some help on the content stuff. I say to a lot of the people I work with, I do not want you spending any more than an hour on your content because, and writing it yourself. And most people who try and do that, they'll spend like days writing a few posts, and it's like, it is a terrible use of their time. And so I say, no, we've got copywriters, we'll work with you, we'll tease it out, and then you look at the draft. We're not going to, we're not going to have you spending a crazy amount of time for very little gain, unless, they're really passionate about it. And then I always give them a gap. By the time they get to the end of a 3-month content program, they've usually got their own opinion by that stage, so they're quite happy to have a go.
Yeah, well, that locks into 2 episodes ago. I interviewed Adam Robinson, the founder of retention.com, and he's going from zero in like even 8 months ago, doing nothing, no social media presence, to a strong social media presence and growing it very quickly, particularly on LinkedIn, but also now doing YouTube and Twitter. And when he started, he had the ideas and everything, but he got some people to write them for him, and that fast-tracked it. And then he moved from there to video. It's a great story. It shows that it can be done, but he's now doing a mini documentary series. Behind the scenes. So, obviously he's all in. Yeah. He's doubling and tripling down on video, and he's all in. But, that's concertinaed, but you can, space that out. But what you just said earlier was right. Get people to help you pull it together. It's still your ideas, your thoughts, your insights, your expertise, your knowledge and your wisdom. And it's you're just getting someone to help package it for you and get it out there in a way that's not going to kill you in time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because the time is the one thing that we have so little of. So I actually think that's an interesting insight because I find that with my clients, when they first do a post, is that invariably somehow the LinkedIn algorithm goes, well, hey, let's give them a lot of encouragement and boost it wherever we can so they do more. I just feel that because some of these people get, they've got 900 maximum connections and they get 6,500 views on it.
Oh, wow.
so as a consequence, I'm like, oh gosh, you're outranking me. This is outrageous. But it's fabulous to see them when they kind of they go, look, it's going really well. And then they're encouraged to keep going. So whatever's in the kind of back room of LinkedIn, there's something there that says, and it goes in notifications and all the rest of it, and then off it goes.
That's true. If people haven't heard from forever, they haven't seen it before, and they're just all of a sudden popping up, and often people say, well, this is my first video or my first post or something, and people really give it a bit of a kick along as well. They jump in because it's a bit of a novelty for them. That sounds a bit like TikTok too, because TikTok really rewards newbies on TikTok, and those that are big and that they're big and all of that, but they don't necessarily get looked after as much as the newbies do as well. So there's probably something in that. And really, I guess we've covered it. Really, your 4th cornerstone really is about getting started and getting out there. And I think all of what we talked about is about getting started and getting out there. But so if I want to just sort of recap and summarise that, Nina, and thank you for your time. There's a lot of great insights there, and some really good tips. And they're things that we forget about. They're really things we forget about. And I think this whole notion about being intentional, about building relationships in a strategic and sustainable and respectful way, I think that's absolutely critical. And yes, I think we took a hiatus over COVID, and I think there's a lot of us, and I count myself in it, been slow to get back out there. And I've made efforts in more recent times to do that. And some people get so caught up in their own work that they forget that the power of their online community, their network, the people, their allies, and just sometimes you've got to be the one to be proactive, and it can result in some amazing, deeper relationships and things that you never, opportunities might come from that you just never expected.
That's right. And it actually becomes fun. So, I just see people who go from feeling really nervous about reaching out and connecting with people, just suddenly finding that the work they're doing is so rewarding because they're getting different levels of input that's just helping them to step up. And there's this confidence that comes with it too, is suddenly you're out, you're talking to people, you're bringing things back to work and you're sharing them, or as a business owner, you kind of keep having the ideas coming. It's quite energizing. And, we can't always do it, so it is an up and down journey. But, the fact that things become fun when you start to meet people and talk to them and ask questions and listen is kind of really powerful.
This is business, Nina. We're not allowed to have
I know.
And I think, again, going back in that intentionality, if, there's people you've got relationships and you probably just need to get back out there and do it, or you're starting a bit more from, behind the eight ball, and you need to be a bit more proactive to you might be a bit more reticent in that regards, and they're the times when you've really got to do it as well. So, and you being useful and helpful, and being interesting and interested in others, so, and plenty of ways to get to people as well.
Yes.
Including our old friend LinkedIn. So, Nina, thank you very much. Where's the best place? You've got the profile builder business still, and you've got your advisory. What are the best two websites to get you on?
Yeah, so harmonicadvisory.com.au is my primary one, but profilebuilder.com.au has a little tool on it for people to have a crack at doing an elevator pitch, so they can go there. But if people want to connect on LinkedIn, and would welcome the connection.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
The reputation economy is here. The world today needs more genuine, credible experts and leaders to stand up and share their experience, their wisdom, their stories and ideas. Are you in?